Jennifer's new school project is capitalism. They're making and selling potholders.
Doing a damn good job.
What can I get you?
1985 was the year TV networks looked at the scoreboard and said, okay, so America wants comfort, charisma, and a show that doesn't feel like homework. And then, because networks are networks, they immediately responded by greenlighting a bunch of expensive experiments, odd hybrids, and this'll totally be the next big thing. Pitches that lasted about as long as a mall pretzel in a food court. It's not that the ideas were always terrible. That's the fun part. A lot of these shows sounded great in a meeting. You've got crime dramas with movie star swagger. Paranormal mystery before the 90s made it cool. Big, ambitious adult drama attempts that wanted to be prestige TV before prestige TV was even a phrase. But 1985 also had brutal competition, trigger-happy scheduling, citing networks that treated time slots like a game of musical chairs. Except the music stops every week and somebody gets canceled. So today, we're counting down the biggest TV flops of 1985. The shows that crashed, burned, or simply vanished into the fog, along with the real reasons they went wrong. 10. Hollywood Beat, ABC. If you want a perfect example of how TV can quietly fail without anyone even noticing, Hollywood Beat is your show. The pitch sounds solid. Cops in LA, showbiz adjacent grit, a little glamour on the surface, a little grime underneath. You can practically hear the executive saying, it's Hill Street Blues meets the backlot. Except, it never becomes anything you can hold on to. The biggest issue wasn't even the concept. It was oxygen, or lack of it. A show needs room to breathe, to build a cast, to teach the audience who everyone is and why we should care. Instead, Hollywood Beat got stuck in that classic 1985 danger zone. A schedule where viewers weren't forming habits, and networks weren't offering second chances. Then there's the competition problem. By the mid-80s, audiences already had crime dramas they trusted, with distinct voices and recognizable rhythms. If you're going to enter that arena, you can't be another cop show. You have to be the cop show with a hook so sharp it cuts through remote control surfing. Hollywood Beat didn't cut. It kind of waved politely. And when a network senses polite, it panics. Shows get pulled, shifted, burned off, or half promoted like a guilty secret. That's how something becomes a flop without even getting the dignity of a proper failure. No iconic bad episodes, no legendary train wrecks, just a quiet slide into the TV abyss. Next up, a show that tried to be spooky and clever and got fed to the biggest sitcom buzzsaw on television. 9. Shadowchasers, ABC. Shadowchasers had one of those premises that makes you think, wait, why don't I remember this? Because it was basically paranormal investigation. TV before the world was ready to make paranormal investigation. TV a whole lifestyle. On paper, it's got juice, strange cases, eerie mysteries, and a vibe that says, the truth is out there, even if nobody's selling posters yet. But execution in 1985 is tricky. Genre shows live or die by consistency. Tone, rules, characters. The feeling that this world makes sense, even when it's supernatural. And Shadowchasers struggled to lock that in quickly enough. But let's be real. The biggest problem wasn't the ghosts. It was the time slot. In 1985, some nights weren't just competitive. They were practically protected by law. If you were running against the kingpins of network comedy, you weren't launching a show. You were volunteering it as tribute. Viewers weren't browsing. They were committed. So while Shadowchasers needed curiosity, the audience was busy hanging out with the most comfortable living room lineup on Earth. And when the numbers don't pop instantly, networks start treating the show like it's the problem. Promotion gets weird. Scheduling gets jittery. The show becomes a question mark before the audience has time to decide. That's fatal for a concept that relies on momentum and word of mouth. So Shadowchasers became one of those cool idea, wrong era, wrong battlefield shows. The kind of flop that makes you think, if this had landed in the 90s, it might have lasted 7 seasons and had a movie. Coming up, one flop that wasn't just about ratings. Real life knocked it off the rails. 8. Lime Street, ABC. Some shows flop because they're bad. Some flop because networks panic. And then there are the rare cases where a show's fate gets tangled up with something bigger than television. Lime Street is one of those. The show wanted to be glossy and international, an adventurous mystery drama with a charismatic lead and a world traveler energy. You can see what they were aiming for. Something stylish, a little romantic, with enough intrigue to feel grown up without being bleak. In 1985, that kind of vibe felt like a way to stand out from the usual domestic sitcom rhythm. But TV isn't just scripts and sets, it's production reality. And Lime Street ran into a nightmare scenario where circumstances outside the show changed everything. When something huge happens to a production, the engine that keeps it moving, creative confidence, network patience, cast chemistry, public perception, gets disrupted all at once. And here's the other issue. Even before things went sideways, it still faced the classic mid-80s challenge of identity. Was it a slick detective series? A globe-hopping adventure? A family story with a dad at the center? All those can work. But not if the audience can't describe the show in one sentence after seeing it once. Networks also didn't handle fragile shows gently back then. If anything wobbled, they didn't stabilize it. They backed away, lowered the volume, and moved on to the next shiny pitch. So, Lime Street didn't just lose ratings. It lost momentum, which is even harder to recover. The result is a flop that feels tragic and complicated. Because it's not purely the show failed. It's the show never really got the chance to become what it wanted to be. Next, NBC tries to invent superhero TV and learns that being early is basically the same thing as being wrong. 7. Misfits of Science, NBC. Misfits of Science is what happens when a network says, people like action, people like comedy, people like weird science stuff. So what if we do all of it at the same time? And then the show arrives like a blender you didn't put the lid on. The premise is fun. A team of oddball people with unusual abilities, science gone wild vibes, and a slightly tongue-in-cheek approach. It's basically a superhero ensemble before superheroes were a dependable TV business plan. In a later decade, this could have been a cult smash right out of the gate. In 1985, it landed in a world where audiences weren't trained to accept this kind of genre cocktail weekly. The biggest problem was tone. If you're going to do heightened sci-fi, you need rules. If you're going to do comedy, you need rhythm. If you're going to do action, you need stakes. Misfits kept shifting its weight, like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to be sincere, silly, or stylish. And when a show can't commit, the audience doesn't know how to watch it. It also suffered from the classic network issue. If the numbers aren't instant, the schedule starts wobbling. A wobbly schedule is poison for anything even slightly unusual, because unusual shows need habit viewing to build trust. So it became one of those shows people discover later and say, this is kinda great. Which is a nice compliment, but it's also an obituary. In 1985, kind of great wasn't enough. You needed to be obvious, immediate, and easy to sell in a 10-second promo. Coming up, a show with one of the most 1985 TV pitch meeting premises ever, an ex-con priest crime fighter. 6. Helltown, NBC. If you ever want proof that the 80s would greenlight literally anything as long as it sounded intense, Helltown is the receipt. The pitch is bold. An ex-con becomes a priest and fights crime in a rough neighborhood. That's not a premise. That's 3 premises wearing a trench coat. And honestly, that kind of mashup can work if the show finds a clear voice. But Helltown had a built-in identity problem. Viewers tune in and ask, okay, so what kind of show is this? If the answer is yes, you're in trouble. Is it a gritty crime drama? Is it a redemption story? Is it a moral parable? Is it action forward? Is it character forward? The show wants to hit multiple lanes at once, and the result is a series that feels like it's constantly adjusting the volume. One week you're watching tough street drama, the next it leans into sermon-y seriousness, and then it swings back into crime of the week territory. There's also the audience targeting issue. Network TV in 1985 still lived and died by mass appeal. If you go too gritty, you lose the comfort crowd. If you go too moralizing, you lose the just entertain me crowd. If you try to do both, you risk pleasing nobody. And then we've got scheduling. A show like this doesn't survive instability. If it doesn't get a reliable slot and consistent promotion, it can't build that I know what I'm getting relationship with viewers. The moment it feels like a weird outlier, people stop making time for it. So Helltown becomes a fascinating flop. Not because it had zero ideas, but because it had too many ideas and no simple way to package them into a weekly habit. Next, ABC tries to do edgy and learns that edgy comes with consequences. 5. Lady Blue, ABC. Lady Blue is a classic 1985 network contradiction. We want something bold and tough, followed immediately by, wait, no, not like that. The show centered on a no-nonsense female detective with an action-heavy approach. In theory, it's a strong concept, especially in an era when tough cop TV was a proven formula. But the show leaned hard into intensity, and the intensity became the headline. When a show becomes known less for its characters and more for the controversy around it, that's rarely a path to long-term success on broadcast television. The other problem is that gritty without depth can feel repetitive fast. A tough cop series needs more than attitude. It needs cases that hook you, a supporting cast you care about, and a tone that feels purposeful instead of just aggressive. Or if the audience senses the show is trying to shock them more than engage them, they'll bounce. Then comes the network behavior that kills so many flops. The shuffle. When numbers disappoint, the show gets moved, tweaked, reintroduced like it's a different product, and promoted in a frantic way that makes viewers assume it's already failing. Even if you haven't watched a single episode, you can smell that kind of desperation in the commercials. So Lady Blue ends up in a lose-lose. It tries to stand out by being intense, gets criticized for being intense, and then gets destabilized by the very network that wanted edgy in the first place. It's not just a flop. It's a cautionary tale about how broadcast TV wanted to flirt with darkness, but still sleep with the lights on. So coming up, ABC swings for a serious crime family drama before the country was ready to binge it. 4. Our Family Honor, ABC. Before crime family prestige drama became a whole industry, ABC tried to make it happen in 1985 with Our Family Honor. This show wanted to be weighty, serious, adult, the kind of drama that feels like it's trying to elevate network TV into something bigger than watch it while folding laundry. And that ambition is exactly why it struggled. In 1985, audiences didn't have streaming. They didn't have on-demand. They couldn't easily catch up. If you missed an episode of a heavy serialized drama, you weren't just behind. You were basically locked out. So a show like Our Family Honor needed clarity, consistency, and a strong enough hook that viewers would rearrange their week to keep up. Instead, it landed in the awkward middle, too intense to be casual comfort viewing, but not established enough to feel essential. It's like opening a fancy restaurant in a neighborhood where everyone's already loyal to their favorite burger spot. Marketing didn't help either. How do you sell a show like this in a quick promo? Two families, secrets, crime, loyalty, betrayal. That's not a pitch. It's a fog machine. If viewers can't instantly picture the fun or the emotional pull, They won't sample it. And then there's the network reality. Shows like this need time. They need a season to build momentum and reputation. But 1985 networks didn't nurture. They judged fast. If a show didn't hit immediately, it got treated like dead weight. So, Our Family Honor became an early casualty of a format that would later thrive, just not yet. It's one of those flops that feels like it arrived a decade too soon. Next, CBS takes a popular movie and tries to stretch it into weekly TV, and the premise starts to snap. 3. Stir Crazy, CBS. Turning a hit movie into a TV show is one of television's favorite bad habits, because a movie is a sprint, a TV series is a treadmill, and Stir Crazy learned that the hard way. The original premise, two guys wrongly convicted, stuck in chaos, trying to survive and escape, works great as a feature film. You've got momentum, escalation, and a satisfying arc. But as a weekly series, the question becomes, how long can we do this without it getting ridiculous? And the answer is, not as long as CBS hoped. With a concept like this, the show has two options. Option 1, become a character-driven comedy with enough heart that you're really watching the friendship, not the plot. Option 2, become a wacky adventure series where the premise is basically an excuse for weekly situations. Stir Crazy couldn't lock in either lane strongly enough to feel like a must-watch. Then there's the network panic spiral. When CBS didn't get the numbers it wanted, the show started getting treated like a problem to solve, rather than a world to build. That's when you see the signs. Inconsistent scheduling, weird pauses, retooling energy, the sense that the series is auditioning for survival every week. And viewers can smell that. They don't invest in a show that feels temporary, especially not one with a premise that already feels like it might collapse under its own weight. So Stir Crazy became the kind of flop that's almost inevitable, not because it had no laughs, but because the concept was never meant to be a long-term weekly relationship. It was meant to be a one-and-done ride. Next, CBS tries a Friends at a Crossroads dramedy that wanted to capture a vibe. But vibes are hard to serialize. 2. Helltown, CBS. Helltown had that very mid-80s adult drama with feelings energy. The kind of show that wants you to watch and nod thoughtfully like, yes, life is complicated. It aimed for a naturalistic tone, a group dynamic, and that bittersweet, we're not kids anymore atmosphere. The problem is that atmosphere is fragile. It's hard to sell, hard to summarize, and even harder to make into a habit. Because if the hook is quiet emotion, your competition can destroy you by simply being louder, funnier, or more obviously entertaining. Shows like this need two things to survive. First, a cast that pops immediately. Characters so vivid you want to spend time with them even when nothing big is happening. Second, scheduling support that helps the show find its people. Helltown didn't get enough of either. There's also the what is it factor. If viewers can't tell whether a show is a drama, a comedy, or a warm ensemble piece, they won't prioritize it. They'll say, I'll try it sometime. And sometime is television's most dangerous word. And then, of course, there's the schedule shake. When a show like this gets moved around, it loses the little momentum it has. Viewers aren't obsessively tracking it. They're not reading recaps. They just stop encountering it. And in the network era, not encountering a show was basically the same thing as never hearing about it again. So Helltown ends up as one of the most painful types of flops. The invisible one. Not the scandal. Not the legendary disaster. Just a show that couldn't cut through the noise long enough to become anyone's favorite. 1. Foley Square, CBS. Foley Square is the kind of flop that makes you want to yell at the TV schedule itself. Because sometimes the what went wrong isn't the jokes or the acting or even the concept. Sometimes the failure is simple. The network never let the audience find the show. The setup had potential. A legal workplace sitcom with a New York City vibe, built around the daily grind and personalities in the system. Not every legal show needs to be intense courtroom drama. A smart, character-forward comedy in that world can absolutely work. But the moment CBS started moving it, the show's fate was basically sealed. Here's the thing about broadcast TV habits. Viewers don't follow a show the way they do now. They don't get a push notification. They don't binge the season later. They watch what's in front of them at the same time each week. If you change that, you're not adjusting strategy. You're asking your audience to do homework. And most people will not do homework for a sitcom they're still getting to know. Worse, a time slot move sends a message. It tells viewers, this isn't working. Even if they've never seen it, they assume it's already on life support. That kills curiosity. It kills word of mouth. It kills that feeling of, I should check this out. So Foley Square became a victim of the most common network flop pattern. A show that might have grown with stability gets yanked around until it can't build an identity or an audience. It's like trying to grow a plant while moving it to a different window every 2 days and then acting surprised when it dies. And that's why it's our number one. Not necessarily the worst show on the list, but the clearest example of 1985 TV logic. Panic first, nurture never. Conclusion. So what did we learn from the biggest TV flops of 1985? First, time slots were brutal. If you were unlucky enough to land opposite a powerhouse, your new series premiere was basically a public execution. Second, the networks were chasing trends so hard they kept tripping over their own shoelaces. If something wasn't instantly clear, instantly marketable, instantly habit-forming, it didn't get time to develop. And that's how a lot of interesting ideas became trivia questions. Third, tone is everything. A show can survive a thin premise if it has a strong voice. But if it can't decide what it is, comedy, drama, action, mystery, viewers won't decide either. They'll just change the channel. And finally, stability matters. Half these flops weren't unwatchable. They were unprotected, shuffled, underpromoted, or treated like experiments instead of investments. Now I want to hear from you. Which 1985 flop sounds like it deserved a second chance? Or is there a show I missed that face-planted even harder? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the weirdest network TV failures, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next countdown.